Listen, a few weeks ago, I showed you something on LinkedIn where someone from Microsoft was doing a demo. They were
Yep.
demoing this dashboard feature where
Mm.
they could talk to Copilot and have it create a dashboard on the fly.
Yep.
A pretty nice looking dashboard. It wasn't like foolishness. It was like a pretty nice looking dashboard. It now inside of SharePoint, you can access Copilot to create dashboards, interactive dashboards on the fly. These are HTML dashboards that, when they're created, they hang out in your library. They're hosted inside of your library. There's other places you could host it. There's other ways you could enhance this feature, all of that. But before I go any deeper, Nick, what you got about Copilot creating interactive dashboards?
Don't really understand why we are returning to having HTML files flying around. I mean, the last time I was dealing with HTML files outside of some kind of like CMS system was probably when I was like creating gaming websites back in the 1990s. So
Oh, I didn't know you
I,
were doing
I'm
that. Nice.
I'm a little
I
bit
like that.
confused. Yeah, I used to. I learned to create websites initially because of like online gaming stuff, and so I would build websites um, related to groups that I was in to do that. And I wasn't like the website builder, but it was something people used to do in the back in the day. Whether it was on AOL or GeoCities or whatever it was, and
Oh
the only
yeah.
real way to do it was to you created an HTML page, and if you could do something WYSIWYG, that was great, but you had to learn how HTML worked, and then we moved over to CSS, and and then everything went into code, and eventually we went into CMS systems, and we kind of got rid of touching HTML. And now the fact that AI is able to create HTML, it's the same way we've gone crazy about MD. Like now everything is HTML and everything is MD, right? And I don't really have an issue with MD. I think it makes more sense a lot of the time than just having a raw text file, right? But the HTML, I do have a real problem with it. It comes down to this, that, the other day I was doing a training on Copilot in Excel, right? And I did the comparison of you're creating some kind of reporting, and you have some Excel files, you have some data, you want to create some reporting out of it. And there are really two different paths to do this. You could go to Copilot Chat, and you could give Copilot these Excel files or the data that you want to work with, or you could use something like Analyst, these different experiences that are within Chat. And Copilot in the background will be able to analyze your data really well. It'll give you a good answer, but the answer you get will be text on a page, right? And it's really hard in that case to attribute what you're seeing as an output back to the input that you gave it to begin with, right? Move
Right.
that workload over to Copilot in Excel. And the big selling point for me of doing a similar task in Copilot in Excel, look at my data, do some analysis, create some charts, whatever it is you want. So long as you have okay skills in Excel, so long as you know how an Excel formula works, you can go back in and you can take a look at what Copilot creates for you, and you can logic through it and look at what columns did it look at, what rows did it look at, did it create the table in the right way, is it looking at all the data, is it missing anything? And you can understand the inputs that got to those outputs, right? These HTML reports, the same is not true. Well, I mean, if you are an expert on this stuff, sure, you could do it. If you know how to build these dashboards yourself, then sure, you can go in to do it. But the average user that is creating them just doesn't have the ability to open up the code behind that HTML file and understand whether the heck what it's given you is correct. And so,
Mm-hmm,
in
mm-hmm.
terms of attributability and verification, I see this as a real step backward, because any other tool that we have to do something similar within the Microsoft stack, we have that verification path. If we were building Power BI dashboards, you know, we would have verification. We would be able to go back and we'd be able to look at the data model. We'd be able to understand where did that output come from. We do it in Excel. We can understand where did that output come from. Heck, even if you do something in chat or you do something, you can see citations and you can at least see like which file it thinks the different data comes from. Right?
Yeah.
With these
Hmm.
HTML files, you don't have any of that. So I think it looks great. I mean, undoubtedly, these look fantastic. And if they're right, that is great for everyone. But what if they're not? How the
Yeah.
heck
Yeah.
do any of us work that out? And this
That
is
is
the thing that is
so.
really sticking for me, Thurman, every time I see this.
That's funny that you say that, because I don't know if you remember a while ago, one of my complaints, I complained about it so much, I don't know if I did it on this show or where I did it, but one of my complaints was when you're working in chat with any one of these models and you're dealing with data and it gives you back information. I was like, where's the check? How are you supposed to check? So to your point, there's no verification. Like, how can you do a verification? However, the data, okay, I cannot speak for spreadsheets. I think what I'm about to say is probably true for spreadsheets too, but I can't speak for spreadsheets because I haven't done this with spreadsheets.
Hmm.
But let me give you an example of what one of the things that I tried. So I have a risk register that I build in SharePoint. If anybody's interested, you know what I mean, just you can buy the course. But I show you how to build a risk register in SharePoint. But then this risk register goes on a project site. On that same
Yep.
project site, there's a budget list. The budget list now has the ability to connect to risks. So if there's some monetary thing that a risk is causing, you can connect the risk to the budget. Right there on the fly without a report, you can look at SharePoint and see via a filter or just a view and see, oh, my risks have cost us $50,000 for this project so far. I set that out first before I did anything, and I said, all right, look, we can verify right now that 50, it was like $14,000 is we're costing. It has cost us $14,000 in risks on this project. I
Hmm.
went ahead and I built the report. I built the report and went back and checked several different figures because I do have a place to do verification. It's all of my data is sitting inside of a list, multiple lists, and I can go back and look and verify what this thing says. That's what I didn't have before, which I have now. And I'm like, this is one of my favorite things about it because numbers just didn't make sense from a lot of AI tools. It would get things wrong and get them badly wrong.
Hmm.
So like if
Hmm.
I sat there and said, hey, look at my numbers right here. Can you lay out like a projected, like a plan for spending over the next 3 months? It can assume it and do it, but then how do you go back and check, to your point? But with my list on my site, all of the data is there for me to do all of my verification. I know what's going on. So that I love. Number two, to your other point about the code. Uh okay. So in the age of AI, speaking of, you can get through verifying code or checking code or even updating code using AI. You just got to find the right tool that can do it. So like if you don't know HTML and you're like, all right, I want to change something in the HTML of this document, of this dashboard, you can do it if either talk to Copilot or pick your other tool and say, here's what I want to do and show me the thing that I have to update. What is missing, to your point, is like if you aren't already knowledgeable about what's actually happening. But I will say, for a really long time, because people publish code on the internet, that has been happening for a really long time, where people will find code and you know use it even without knowing how to write it. Like the GitHub, where you can get SharePoint. Like people from the community will submit all kinds of custom code that you can use in your SharePoint environment. But I think those two things are mitigated. Like I can give HTML to somebody right now who doesn't know anything about HTML, and they can problem solve their way through editing the code because of AI. And then number two, there is a verification path with your data that you could say, wait a minute, this don't sound right. Let me check it out. And you can go take a look. It's Nick, I'm very, very impressed with this update. I gotta be
But what's the
honest. There's
point
one
of the dashboard? Like, if every
so
user of that dashboard has to go and do that verification, what is the point of the dashboard? Like, what is it
wait,
adding to? So you know,
why do
you
they have to
could
do the
verify
verification?
you could verify at a point in time that the dashboard you're looking at is showing you the data that you think it's going to show you, right? You can
Mm-hmm,
verify that is the case. That is not
mm-hmm.
the same as seeing a formula in Excel and understanding that that formula is scalable, that it's going to, if something else changes in your data set, that it's going to align later on, right? You don't know that to be the case. You don't know that if someone went in and changed a figure in your underlying data, that the view that you've got in the HTML dashboard would update. You could infer that it probably would, but you don't know that to be the case. Whereas in Excel or in Power BI, we know that to be the case because it is verified through the technology path that you're using to get from data to display, that so long as you've configured it to do that, that's what's going to happen.
Right. Okay, gotcha. So the last thing I was gonna say, the only challenge, well, I'm gonna tell you what the value is, but the only challenge that I see right now is back when I first saw this demo, before they connected it to lists, I was like, wait, why didn't they do that with Power BI? Because that's their tool. That's the tool that
Mm.
they use for dashboarding. Why didn't y'all spend the time? Because I see Copilot inside of Power BI, but I haven't seen anybody, and I've tried myself. I haven't seen a way to speak to Copilot and then a Power BI dashboard be built. I've never seen that. So I'm like, this is great. I like this, but how come y'all didn't do it for Power BI? Because Microsoft is doing that thing again where they're creating multiple ways to get to an end and kind of like cutting one off in order to do this one. And here's what I mean. If I'm talking to a client, I now have a decision to make. I can say, come to training, let me show you how to create a SharePoint list, populate it with data, run a flow on top of it, and then also build reports on it using Power BI.
Mm.
If the customer knows that they can write a prompt and do the same thing that the Power BI report would do, which is answer questions, give me the results of my data in a way that I can understand so that I can make informed decisions. That's the point of any dashboard. If they can do that by writing a prompt versus me showing them how to build a Power BI report, they're going to take the prompt. And to me, this is the value. The value is in that an end user, a leadership can prompt their way to a dashboard, which can they do the same with a Power BI report? Maybe, but you'd probably be like an operations person doing this. But the CEO of the company, that CEO of the company right now today is using AI and is prompting like everybody is. So
Mm.
now you've given that CEO the ability to know that, the data is, if y'all are taking care of the data like it's supposed to be, then the reports you've built are great, but maybe I want to go in there and build my own report. I can do it with a prompt, or my COO or anybody in operations or any part of the departments, if they know that the data is being, managed correctly, then they can now create a dashboard and take to leadership or use for themselves or use for their directs. That to me is the value that they have provided here, whether it's connected to a spreadsheet or not. The value they've provided is the ability to build those dashboards as a typical end user, which I think is, you already know the way that I think my way through, updates that are cool versus updates that are super value and excellent is, can I take this to
Mm.
a end user or a client and say, hey, this is something valuable that you can use. And this one feels like, I know this one is ridiculously valuable to my clients. You know what I mean? That's what I think the value is here for
I think
those
I
folks.
think it's valuable to everyone if it can be verified to be correct. And I think that's the place where I get stuck on this. Of like, if you suddenly like the difficulty with all of the AI outputs that we see around us is we have all kind of grown up to where we are right now, thinking that there's a correlation between polish and correctness. Like the people who bother to like polish their work are generally also the people who bother to make sure that work is right. Everyone makes mistakes sometimes, and we have to be open to
Absolutely.
the fact that mistakes will happen. But in general, there is a correlation between polish and correctness. With AI, that doesn't hold up. And so people are looking at these dashboards, and I will not name a name, but I saw a demo of something very similar from a fairly prominent person in the community, where the dashboard that turned up on their screen, just from flipping between frames back and forth, was verifiably incorrect. There was an error in it.
That's wild.
And I mean, I'm sure had they taken the time to verify it and it wasn't in the middle of trying to demo it for a video, they probably would have found it. So I'm not suggesting that that would have ended up if it were real work anywhere else. Like, it wouldn't have been found. But the point is that it's very difficult to look at something that looks really good and not internalize the idea that it is really good. You know, that is the difficulty. And so trying to convince people that you take like text output that's, you know, maybe a little bit rough around the edges, and you have to verify it and work out what it is, and you know, I think that's step one of our challenge with AI verification. Taking something that looks like, you know, a professionally designed dashboard that you know, someone in your Power BI team would have taken a couple of weeks to create previously, and being like, this could be entirely wrong, you need to go away and verify it. That's like step 99 of trying to convince users that they need to verify what it is that AI is creating for them. And so I'm very concerned that we are taking polish and we are thinking that it must be correct. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm not suggesting that every single dashboard anyone creates with a prompt has horrendous errors in it. I'm not suggesting that under the surface, fundamentally, these tools don't work. But what I am suggesting, and I think is fairly plain for anyone who understands this technology to see, is that the likelihood that you end up with errors that wouldn't be caught in the same way they would have been previously through using this path to create this kind of asset is much, much greater. You know, because
Yes.
we're shortcutting the processes that we previously had in place to verify stuff. And to me, when you're talking about I need a dashboard for something, generally it's because that thing is somewhat important to understand, right?
Yeah.
Like, we don't generally have dashboards for things that we don't care about, right?
Right.
So to what degree should we be shortcutting the process of creating a dashboard? To what degree should creating a dashboard be something that is done on a one-to-one basis between you and Copilot using a prompt, versus it being a team effort to create it? You know, all of these things that we've done that have been the friction for creating these things. Not all friction is bad. Some friction
Mm.
actually gets us to a point where the output is better quality in the end. And what I'm suggesting is
Yes.
that, you know, maybe there's a little bit too little friction here, coupled with a little bit too little knowledge for a lot of users on what could be the problem. And those two things together might be setting a decent percentage of these new dashboards up to lead people in the wrong direction.
Yo, it's really interesting to me. You have this stance because it's almost like my bottom line stance, my baseline stance on, we talked about it before. When you open, what other tool do you open up that says, hey, we might get things wrong? Like, that's the first thing that you see when you open up this thing that says, hey, um,
Mm.
hey, it's a car, you know what I'm saying? You're buying a new car, but sometimes the key might not, you know, start or whatever, you know what I'm saying?
But let me
Nothing.
ask you something. Let me just ask you something while
What
you're
you
in the
got?
middle of that thought. Your dashboard that you've created,
Mm-hmm.
does it say that anywhere on it?
That's an excellent question. Um, it doesn't.
And that is the crux of the problem. The acknowledgement of the potential for error is part of the creation process between you and Copilot, or between you and the AI tool. And all the major AI vendors have that built into the creation process. But
Mm-hmm.
we don't have it built into the output. And when it comes to something like a dashboard that updates, like a dashboard that's going to stay live,
Mm-hmm.
that fact that that has been created through this process that can be wrong. We know that 99% of users aren't going in, opening up the code, verifying it, and making small changes to make it the way they want it to make. It's not like a Word document that people are making a little change to, or a PowerPoint they're making a little change to. That promise of we acknowledge that this might be incorrect needs to carry on through to those HTML outputs. If they don't, then the entire chain of custody of the potential incorrectness has been lost. And
Yeah,
that
I'm with you.
is the foundation of my problem with what we're doing here.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. Not even I think. I know I'm with you on that. But I think what I meant to say, I think the chat might tell you it before you open it up. Maybe. I don't remember. Like if you go through the process, write the prompt,
Oh,
then it
it will.
generates it.
It definitely will. I mean, if you're using
Okay, all
Copilot,
right.
it will definitely do that. But
It should.
you carry that HTML file, you stick that in your OneDrive, you send it to someone else. You've just given that to your boss, as a statement of fact. But your example of a risk register, that's pretty straightforward data. There isn't, a lot of it is text data. The numbers that you have in there aren't generally that complicated. It's a
Mm-hmm,
fairly
mm-hmm.
straightforward report to understand, even if you've just got it in a SharePoint list. So you could say, the dashboard is kind of like the cherry on top of what we've already created, right? But going back and checking it is fairly easy. But you
Mm-hmm.
take this example and you apply it to complicated financial information. You apply it to like project management where there's lots of moving pieces. Like it's very easy to get into a position where you're kind of stuck wading through this like treacle of the underlying data is just too complicated to verify against the output that you've got. And that's where
Yeah,
I have a
yeah.
problem. I mean, your risk register example, that seems like low hanging fruit where this makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of the examples I see floating around with this are much more complicated data.
Then now see, that to me is the conclusion. That's where you should get to, at least today. Your thought process, your business rule, if you will, inside of your organization is like, yeah, if it's available, you can create these reports. Make sure that you create it for these kinds of reports, and obviously check your work. But if we're talking about X, Y, and Z reports that talk about this, that has this highly complex data, in this organization, we don't rely on AI to build those reports for us. We need a person to build those reports using a tool and using your expertise and all this other stuff. That could be your first step in the what's going to be a growing process,
Hmm?
because next year this time, this technology is going to be better. And when it gets better, it might be able to handle more complex dashboards. But until then, understand that it just came out, understand that it could get things wrong, understand that, if we got some very critical decisions we need to make, we're not building we're not relying on that to do it. I like the way you're thinking right now, but I would like to see that across the board. You know what I'm saying? Because that's how I'll be feeling. The way you're saying right now is how I'll be like feeling about AI in general, because I'm like, to that point exactly about the verification. When it was throwing out numbers, the one thing that was challenging to me was, okay, I can check math. In school growing up, when you did something, one number plus another number equals this, you take that same number, subtract it from the second number, and you get your original number. that worked well for me. It's great. And it works on its scales. You know what I'm saying? It works all different types of ways. But as soon as AI starts producing phantom numbers that you cannot check, that's crazy to me that you would rely on that. So in this case, I was so shocked because I went through and I checked all of my numbers on my risk register. I was like, wait a minute. I didn't even have to put in a difficult prompt. I just gave it some like loose prompt and said, go at it. And it did it correctly and had my numbers right. I was like, wow, this is mind blowing. This actually works. But to your point, I haven't been introduced to a pretty intricate and detailed dashboard that I need to run this with. I know me. I would have been like, let's try it. Let's see if that works. But thinking in the back of my head, like, it probably won't, but that's okay. Let's try it because there's absolutely still a need for, Power BI and, your Tableaus of the world and all these other tools that you use to build those kinds of reports. They still are needed. Like I would not just jump out the window and be like, hey, use this from now on. But for HR person who is tracking their data in a few lists and they got some personnel who hasn't taken any training, by all means, do this. You know what I'm saying? Give it a shot and see if it works for you. But yeah, I'm with you, Nick. I'm glad you I'm glad you had this thought process because I'm like, I'm still on the Terminator. So it's still that, you know what I mean? Any final thoughts before we get out of here about this these dashboards?
Well, I think the thing that this reinforces for me is that the march of new capabilities when it comes to Copilot or to all of the other AI tools that are out there, it's just non-stop. There's new stuff that it can do, and stuff like this is exciting. I mean, it's exciting to be able to, as an end user, produce something that looks so professional so quickly. It is genuinely something that I understand why people are excited about it. But what it highlights for me is why responsible AI and safe AI and understanding why AI tools can get stuff wrong and how you go about verifying their output has to be a foundation for everyone who is using these tools in business. And if you're someone who is using these tools in business and you don't have that knowledge, then you need to think about equipping yourself with that knowledge. And more importantly, if you're a supervisor or a manager or a business owner and you have people within your organization representing your organization while using these tools, and you haven't created that baseline of knowledge about responsible AI and safety, then you need to go ahead and do that, because these tools are out there and they can do wonderful things and they can do crazy things at the same time. And in the same way that you're not going to let someone get in a company vehicle without verifying that they've got a driver's license, because of the potential of what could go wrong, you shouldn't be letting people get in like a seat in front of a computer and be using Copilot until you've verified that they actually understand what's going on in the background. So I think that's what this comes down to for me, Therman, is it's all about education, because you can turn these tools to a million different things, and there's a lot of things that we should, and there's a lot of things that we shouldn't. And just because we can doesn't mean that we should be doing everything. And I think that's the real foundation for me.
I agree. Did you see the college professor that caught 33 of his 35 students using AI to write their paper?
Yeah, yeah, I saw that.
Yeah. Now, what he was able to do, which is super basic, there are tons of professors out there who don't know how to do that. He just so happened to know how to do that. And that should be, to your point, to your point, I've been saying this for a while. It needs to be basic stuff. So if you're going to be a professor at this college, you need to, just like you need to go through a bunch of other basic training, AI training should be part of the curriculum that you go through to be grading papers at this organization, because you will get outdone by the people who use AI all the time. So your little trick of putting, some text in there, they can circumvent that. You got to know what they know, or at least know how to combat it. So yes, to your point, the education, especially inside of organizations, put the education in there and make it mandatory. So I'm with you, Nick, all the way. Listen, before we go, Why don't you tell people where they can find you and what you might have going on? As a matter of fact, you could even tell them where they could get some responsible AI training, couldn't you?
I might as well, given that we're talking about responsible AI. So, yeah, I do have a training course, Responsible AI for Business Users. I also have my Microsoft 365 Copilot adoption package, which is a full suite of support to adopt Microsoft 365 Copilot. But relevant to what we've been talking about today is that part of my end user adoption program is exactly that responsible AI piece. Learn the basics of what can go wrong and how you avoid that before you ever start using it. And so if you work with me to do something like that, that will be an essential part of the training that I will give your team members. And personally, I think is one of the most important parts. You can learn a lot about Copilot just by playing with it, but if you have the foundation of what can go wrong and how to keep yourself safe, then you're going to keep your organization safe while doing it. How about you, Therman?
Nice. I like that. Same old thing. TikTok. Come find me on TikTok. I'm there every day. SharePoint videos, SharePoint tips, all that other good stuff. And YouTube, I'll be back on YouTube. I never left. My videos are still there, but actively posting. Make sure you subscribe because I'll be back on there showing y'all again more SharePoint stuff that you can use today. So, but jump on over to the TikTok and don't forget about LinkedIn either. All right. Nick, it was a good chat. You know what I mean? I'll see you back here in another couple of weeks.
All right, take care.